By his own description, Johannes Kepler resembled a small lap dog with a fawning eagerness to please. He was nothing if not odd, bow-legged, myopic, afflicted by boils and other ailments. His father had been a mercenary soldier and a drunk. His mother was a psychic who was raised by an aunt who had been burned alive as a witch. In childhood, 2 moments of familial warmth and illumination stood out. Both pointed him toward his career. In 1577, his mother led him up to the top of a hill to point out a comet in the sky. 3 years later, his father took him out one night to witness a lunar eclipse. In grammar school, most of the children got through Latin twice as fast as he did, but his grades improved. He won a coveted scholarship to the Protestant University of Tübingen, where he studied Latin, Greek, Hebrew, geometry, theology, philosophy, mathematics, astronomy, and music. As a student, there wasn't much he could not do. He had a gift for poetry and a passion for riddles and acrostics. He wrote, as he put it, many compositions on unusual subjects, such as the sight of Atlantis through the clouds. He was obsessed with working out elaborate allegories to the minutest detail. For most of his 20s, Kepler struggled. He worked as a dishwasher, taught mathematics in a local high school in Graz, Austria, and tried to make a living casting horoscopes for pitifully small fees. Yet this was the man who would discern the architecture of the solar system and discover the laws that govern the motions of the planets. Immanuel Kant would call him the most acute thinker ever born. By the terms of his scholastic stipend, he was obliged to prepare for the church, so he gave himself up to theology, which he had begun to teach. But in 1594, he reversed course, abandoned all his prospects, and took a poorly paid position again as a high school teacher of mathematics at the Lutheran Seminary in Graz. As a classroom teacher, he did poorly at first, and interspersed his lectures with mumbling digressions, punctuated by sudden revelations that only he could understand. For the most part, these had a mystical cast. Inspired by Pythagoras' doctrine of the music of the spheres, he believed that the movement of the planets along their orbits produced an ethereal harmony, and that the intervals between these orbits had a mathematical relationship that corresponded to the frequencies of the tones of the musical scale. Later, he would publish The Harmony of the World, where he set forth the idea that each planet corresponded to a note in the musical scale. The sun to C, Saturn to a D, Mercury to E, the Moon to F, Mars to G, Venus to A, and Jupiter to B. In a choral sense, he even described Saturn and Jupiter as the bass, Mars the tenor, Venus the contralto, and Mercury the soprano of the celestial choir. He also published an astrological almanac for some years running, and he achieved instant fame by his accurate prediction of two major events: the record-breaking cold of the winter of 1595 and the subsequent invasion of Austria by the Turks. At this time, Kepler ruminated about the influence of planetary patterns upon a person's character at birth. "It influences a human being," he wrote, "as long as they live, the way the slings a peasant wraps around a pumpkin do. For these do not make the pumpkin grow, but they do determine its shape." No one knows how many horoscopes Kepler cast, but at least 800 are still extant from among the thousands he may have prepared. In 1999, another one turned up in the archives at UC Santa Cruz. In 1600, Tycho Brahe invited him to Prague as his assistant, where he set forth in the book The New Astronomy his first two laws of planetary motion. He also published a work in support of Galileo on Jupiter's moons, and began his treatise on the chronology of Christian history, in which he correctly pointed out that the Christian calendar was off by 5 years. And he wrote the first treatise to explain how a telescope works. He also gave the first correct explanation of the structure of the human eye. In the prime of his professional life, he declared that the belief in the effect of the constellations derives in the first place from experience, which is so convincing that it can be denied only by those who have not examined it. Kepler wrote, "The natural soul of the human being is no greater than a single point, and on this point the form and the character of the whole sky is potentially impressed. How so? Inasmuch as the soul bears within itself the idea of the zodiac, or rather of its center. It also feels which planet, at which time, under which degree of the zodiac, and it measures the angles of the rays which meet on the earth." One might begin to wonder if the universe of humanity is not, after all, a hall of mirrors, in which one thing reflects another as well as itself.